Okay, I got that thing tightened, so that's good.
Ah.
Okay.
We have a fancy card. So you get a fancy card.
Okay. We're in the Maimer Vayedaber Elokim,
That great card.
Tavshin Chavtes. We're holding Seif Hey, chapter 5. We discussed in the Maimer, we asked about the word Lamer. In the introduction to the Ten Commandments, it says Vayedaber Elokim is called Dvarim Eila Lamer. God spoke all these things. Lamer, saying, we asked, what does it mean? Why does the verse say Lamer here? Usually Lamer means that God is usually talking to an individual or to a few people, and the word Lamer in a verse means that you repeat it to the people that weren't there to hear it. So generally Hashem talks to Moshe privately, and then he says Lamer, or the verse says God speaks to Moshe Lamer, saying, meaning that he should repeat it to the others. But here, in the introduction to the Ten Commandments, that can't be the case, because everybody was there. There was nobody missing. Not only was everybody there, but you can't even say that Lamer means to tell it to future generations, because even the future generations, everybody was at Mount Sinai. So what does the word Lamer mean? So we gave three explanations of the word Lamer. One was that Lamer means that when a Yid learns, he causes that God should repeat after him. So it's as if when you sit down to learn Torah, Hashem sits on the other side of the table from you, Chavrusa, and what you say, he repeats. That's one interpretation of Lamer. Lamer, which means to repeat, that God repeats what you say. Another meaning in Lamer, we said, is that you repeat, the Yid, when he sits and learns, he's repeating what the Eibishter says. Like we said, quoted from Tehillim, Tan l'shen yimrasecha, that we repeat, my tongue repeats the things that you say. So that's another. So here we have the word Lamer is translated as it is typically, not any different really, in that the word Lamer means to repeat, except that here it doesn't mean that what is being told to you by God should be repeated to others, but that either God repeats what you say or you repeat what God says. And then the third explanation we gave is that Lamer means, the verse starts Vayedaber and ends with the word Lamer. Vayedaber, God says these dibros, these words, the words of the Ten Commandments. And the point is that it should be Lamer, that they should affect the 10 utterances with which God creates the world. In other words, that the Torah should influence and impact and affect the world. Those are the three interpretations of Lamer.
Lamer means everything? Means the world?
Yeah, Lamer is the Asara Mamaris, the 10 utterances. Okay, so those are the three interpretations of Lamer. Then the Rebbe introduces a Maimer, the Rebbe Marash, by the same title, where the Rebbe Marash begins the Maimer with the same question: what's the meaning of the word Lamer here? But before he answers it, and as we're going to see, he only offers one of the three interpretations that we gave at the beginning of the Maimer. But before he answers it, he asks another question, which is, why do the Ten Commandments open with the words Anochi Hashem Elokecha in the singular? I am God, your God, but Elokecha is the singular. Typically, it would be Elokechem in the plural. God speaking to a group of people, it should say Elokechem. Why here is it different? It says Elokecha in the singular. So he explains that what happens at Mount Sinai is that God puts himself, invests his name in every single individual. And so therefore everybody comes away from that experience having had a personal experience, being influenced and impacted personally by God, directly by God, on an individual and a personal level. We went into that, explored that a little bit more, what that means, that the Eibishter's name is within every single Yid, and the impact. We said that the name of God appears in the soul is fashioned in the name of God, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, what the Yud is in the soul, the Hey, etc. And we also explained how it is even in the body, that even the body of a Yid is also in the form of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. That we explained in chapters 3 and 4. Now, we're going to get back to the answer. Now, chapter 5, we're going to continue in the Maimer, the Rebbe Marash, his answer to the question about Lamer. What does Lamer mean? So let's see, chapter 5. Now that we explained, the Rebbe Marash explained in his Maimer, gives an introduction and explains the idea that of Elokecha. Why is it in the singular? Because God makes himself the personal God of every single individual, meaning he invests himself in every single individual, that every person is has God's name invested in him. So now, in the neshama and in the body. So now we can go back to Lamer. So he says like this, chapter 5. Mamshech about Maimer. So the Rebbe Marash continues and explains in his Maimer the Pirush Vayedaber Gemer Lamer, what is the meaning of Vayedaber Lamer, which is the original question that he asks. So he explains what's the Indian of Lamer. What does Lamer mean here? Why does the verse in the opening of the Ten Commandments say the word Lamer? It's because at Mount Sinai every person, every Yid was given the ability to read Torah, that when he reads Torah, he causes that God should also study Torah. That's the koyach, the ability that was given to every single Yid at Mount Sinai, is that he has the power that when he studies Torah, he causes God to study Torah opposite him. This is true not only in Torah, but this is also true with regard to mitzvahs. That mitzvah through a Jew performing a mitzvah, he causes that God should also perform the mitzvah.
We do live
Yeah. Right, what he does, he tells us to do so. We explain that there are two interpretations of it. Either that he already does it, and therefore we do it. That would be similar to the other one, the Tam L'Shayni, we respond after God. But the other pirish is that through us doing, we cause him to do. Right? That's the same concept. Yeah. How is it that a Jew has the power, the ability, that through him studying Torah, he causes God to study Torah, and furthermore, and through his observance of the commandments, fulfillment of the commandments, he causes that God should also perform the commandments. So where does the person get the strength? A Yid get the strength that through his studying Torah, he causes God to study Torah. Through his performance of mitzvahs, he causes God to perform the mitzvahs. It's because when God gives us the Torah, he says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha in the singular. Right? So in other words, we in the summary here, we were saying, in the Maimer, the Rebbe Marash asks the question about Lamer. But before he addresses Lamer, see, if he could just go straight to the answer, that what's Lamer? That the Yid, through his studying Torah, causes God to study Torah. But what's the meaning in that? How does that work? What's the asbar? What's the explanation? How is it that a Yid causes God to do it? So before he even answers the question, he first gives an introduction. That what happens at Mount Sinai, Anochi Havaya Lekecha, Hashem invests himself within every single person. And since he's invested within every person, so therefore a person is invested with this ability, with this power, with this capacity to be able to cause God to respond to his actions, to what it is that he's doing. Okay? So in Rebbe Marash's Maimer, seemingly he's saying Lamer, just one interpretation. We offered three in our Maimer. Rebbe Marash is only giving the one. That Lamer is that when a Yid studies Torah, God repeats after him. That's what Lamer means, that God repeats after him. But in order to get there, he gives us an introduction. What's the introduction? There are two parts to the introduction. One thing he says is that the Eibusher puts his name into every single one, into every single person. The other thing he says in the introduction is that in order for the person to be invested with this divine name, that has to come from a higher place, right? Remember, as we discussed, as it relates to the Yud Kei Vav Kei in the neshama, and as it's Yud Kei Vav Kei in the body, how do we get to Yud Kei Vav Kei? He's saying that it's higher. The name of the Eibusher that's in the Yid is higher than the name of the Eibusher that's in the Malachim. Why? Because if it's coming lower, it needs to come from a higher place. So in the neshama, it comes from a noichi that causes that Havaya becomes Elokecha. In the body, it's through the Gilui, the revelation of the essence of Havaya itself. Either way, we're drawing from a higher source in order for it to come lower. So the concept of, in order for something to reach lower, it needs to come from somewhere higher, is the other aspect of the introduction in the Rebbe Marash's mind. And after this, he goes on to say that Lamer means that a Yid is now invested with this power, since it comes from a higher place, as is evidenced by the fact that it comes to somewhere lower into the person. So that higher energy gives the person the power that through him studying Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu connected, the Eibusher studies and mimics what he's doing.
The Rebbe Marash says this whole thing in the Maimer, that since it's coming from
well, that's the introduction. He doesn't, yeah. Okay, so v'yashleimar, da'anyan imam avorim ba'maimer b'torah gedam ala pirish de'leimer. So we could say that these things that the Rebbe Marash brings in his Maimer as an introduction to his explanation of the word Lamer, that Shalima, which is what? What's his explanation of Lamer? Is that Shalima that Torah the Adam Goyim She'akadosh Baruch Hu Kodesh V'Shein Kenegdai, that a Yid, what's Lamer mean? That a Yid, when he studies Torah, causes God to study Torah opposite him. So what are the things that he brings in the Maimer as an introduction to this commentary? Is that Habitul the Yisrael Yidei Shakadosh Baruch Hu Shitav Shmai. The idea that a Yid becomes batul, nullified to God, through God investing his name in the Yid, right? That causes a bittul. Yeah, like we said, we bring from the Malachim the union of Adnai Vamsina B'Kodesh, and he goes through a whole explanation, which he doesn't bring here in this Maimer. But the idea that the God's name and the Malachim are Poyel Abitul, the Malachim are totally nullified before God, and that's what it means that they're called by God's name. Similarly, a Yid is batal to God because he's invested with God's name. And that the second point is V'shah Koyach Shavai Yelikecho Me'anoichi Shalamayla Ma'avaya. And the other thing that he explains is that how is it that a Yid is invested with God's name is it comes from Anoichi, which is higher than Havaya. Why? Because Kikol HaSham Shachi Lamata Yeser Lefish Sheri Sham Shachi Memakar Naila Yeser. Yeah, because everything, the lower something comes is a sign that it comes from somewhere higher. So in the Malachim, as he explained, in the Malachim, what name of God is invested in the angels? Elokim. Or Adnai. Adnai Vamsina V'Kodesh. Adnai, as we explained last time, Adnai and Elokim are basically the same concept. But which name of God is invested in the neshamas and in the bodies of a Yid? Yud Kei Vav Kei, the higher name. Why? Because for it to come lower, it has to come from somewhere higher. So there's a higher name, and that higher name, how does that name come into the Yid? Through Anoichi. And that's the meaning of Anoichi, Havaya Lekecha, that Anoichi, which is God's essence, causes that Havaya, that name should come down even lower to become Lekecha of the Yid.
Anoichi not the highest?
Yeah, but he is in the Guf, it's the essence of Havaya itself that's revealed.
And Anoichi is the essence of
Anoichi, when he says that Anoichi becomes Havaya, that's just the fact that Anoichi has the power to cause that Havaya becomes invested in the neshama. And as we explained, what's deeper, since the name of Havaya is in the body is lower than the soul. So for that, what you need is the essence of Havaya itself, because for it to take on the form of the for the Yud Kei Vav Kei take on the form of Havaya, for the body to take on the form of Yud Kei Vav Kei of Havaya, you can't just force it down from something higher than it, from Anoichi, because it doesn't take on its persona. It's just forced on it. But how is it the body itself becomes Havaya-like? So that's through revealing the essence of Havaya itself, which is that it's not limited to the spiritual or the physical. It's undefinable. Right? Okay. But the point is, the point is like this: that in the Maimer he brings we don't have to get sidetracked by that. What's relevant here is two things. Number one, that the name of the Eibishter is invested in the Yid. That happens on Mount Sinai, which causes the Yid to be batal, nullified. That's what the meaning of the name of the Eibishter invested in Yid means. What does it mean that the Yid becomes batal, nullified to God? And the second thing is that the fact that it comes so low down into the Jewish soul, into the Jewish body, means that it comes from somewhere even higher. It comes from a higher place.
Why are we low than Malachim?
That it's a higher place that comes to a lower place.
We are technically more high than Malachim. Can we do things more?
Of course, and that's why we're invested in something higher. But the point is, it comes lower, it comes down into the physical world. That's what we mean by lower.
We're lower.
Right. Okay, so the Rebbe says, so these two points of introduction in the Maimon, the Rebbe Marash is saying, Dugmas Shara Pirushim Lemar are similar to the other two interpretations of Lemar that we brought in our Maimon. And he explains. The interpretation of Lemar, we said that. What's Lemar? It's like Tan L'Shenim Resecha. That I repeat what the Eibishter says. What does it mean that I repeat what the Eibishter says? It means I'm nothing. The Eibishter is learning Torah, and I'm just merely mimicking and repeating what he says. That represents That's the idea of Bittul, nullification to God. God speaks, and I just repeat after him. I'm nothing. I just repeat what the Eibishter says. So that is similar to the idea of Bittul. The fact, the point in the Rebbe Marash's Maimer where he talks about the name of Hashem invested in the Yid, which causes him to be Batul. But Vayedaber Vayedaber Gomer Lemer Hu Am Shachad Aser Sedibris Basar Mamaris Madgish Amayla Dam Shachal Amata. And the other Pirush of Lemer, the interpretation of Lemer, that Lemer, we said that Vayedaber is Lemer, that the Torah influences and is invested and impacts the world, is invested in the world, which is meaning the high level of Torah, the higher level of Torah comes down to the lower level, which is the world. That is similar to the other aspect that he mentions, which is that in order for something to come down lower, it needs to come from somewhere higher. That, as he explains in his Maimer, that it's Anoichi that causes Havaya to become Elokecha. Or that Yud Kei Vav Kei B'Miloi is in the body. Either way, the point is something higher comes down into something lower. So for something that's higher to come down very low, that's the same idea, that Vayedaber Lemer, that the Aser Sedibris comes down into Lemer, into the world. Okay. So the Rebbe Marash doesn't directly offer these two interpretations of Lemer. He doesn't directly offer these two interpretations. He only offers one interpretation, which is that a Yid through his study, causes the Eibusher to study, but the way he arrives at that interpretation with these 2 points of introduction, those 2 points of introduction are similar to those other two interpretations of Lamer.
He's studying or studying our study?
I'm sorry?
He's studying or he's studying our study?
He's repeating what we're saying, so he's studying with us. So,
I thought he's really like marveling at the studying that we're doing. It's sort of,
but it says he's Kaira V'Shayna Kenegda. He's learning opposite us. So v'zeh shnei inyanim eila boim ba'mayim k'akdam ala pirish. Shalemer hu shal yidei lemad Torah da adam geirim liyas hakadosh baruch hu Kaira V'Shayna Kenegda. So the fact that these 2 points are introduction to Lamer. So we must say, even in the Rebbe Marash's Maimers, ki kol hapirushim anyanim b'Lamer sheichim zalazeh. We have to say that all these interpretations are connected. So we have seemingly 3 different things. Lamer meaning that the Yid causes the Eibusher to repeat. Another meaning that Lamer is the Yid repeating after the Eibusher. And the other one that Lamer is the impact that Torah has on the world. There's seemingly 3 different things. And yet the fact that even in the Rebbe Marash's Maimer where he only brings 1 pirush, but to get to it, he brings an introduction that incorporates, that's similar to the other 2. So already that alludes to the fact that there's a connection between them. And especially if we look at note 38, something we mentioned previously, especially considering the fact, the concept, we know the principle, that all interpretations in a verse are connected with each other. As we know the raya of this from Shatnez, we just had in last week's parsha, Shatnez, the word Shatnez is the word Shaya Tovim and Noise, which means that which teaches us, the Gemara says that what's the prohibition of Shatnez is when you have it spun and combed and woven all together. You have to have all 3 stages for it to be a biblical Isser. Why all 3 stages? Why not one? Why isn't one up? Because all 3 appear in the same word. So therefore they're all linked, and so therefore that's the prohibition. So the point is that we see that when you have 3 seemingly disparate interpretations, we know Shivim Panam al Torah, you can interpret a verse in many different ways. But the fact that these different interpretations are in the same words means that there's a connection between them. So the fact that we have 3 different ways of understanding this same singular word of Lamer, which we said the word Lamer sums up what happens at Mount Sinai. What was new at Mount Sinai? What was the new experience at Mount Sinai? We said we can sum it up in the word Lamer, and here we have 3 different interpretations of what that means. So there must be a connection between them. And that connection is already alluded to in the Maimer of the Rebbe Marash, where in order to get to his interpretation of Lamer, he first goes through the other two Pirushim of Lamer. What is the connection? So that we'll get to now in chapter 6. The Rebbe starts to explain. So v'yesh Lamer habir bazeh. So we can explain we can explain it like this. At Mount Sinai, there are 3 things that take place at Mount Sinai. Or there are 3 players at Mount Sinai. There were 3 players. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu Neis Torah. There's God who gives the Torah. The Yisrael Mekablei HaTorah. There's the Yidden that receive the Torah. And then there's VaTorah Atzma. Then there's the Torah itself. So there are 3 players at Mount Sinai. The giver of the Torah, the receiver of the Torah, and the Torah that's being transmitted. Right? These are the 3 actors at Mount Sinai. And so the Chiddush of Matan Torah, basically, what everyone wants to say is that the Chiddush of Matan Torah is with all 3 players. There's a Chiddush in the Eibusher giving us, the giver of the Torah. There's a Chiddush, there's something new that happens in the Yidden that receive the Torah. And there's a Chiddush in the Torah itself that's being transmitted. In all 3, something new happens at Mount Sinai. So it's not just, seemingly, you look at Matan Torah, you say, what's the Chiddush of Matan Torah? So there's one Chiddush. But the Rebbe says this, it's like a 3-pronged thing, because there are 3 players. And in each one, there's a Chiddush, which we'll get to in a moment. But it's interesting, take a look at the very interesting footnote, note 39. So that we talk about the fact that there are 3 players at Mount Sinai, the Eibusher, the giver, the Yidden, the receiver, and the Torah itself. And he says something interesting. That if you look at the Mamarim in Likutei Torah Mamarim of the Alter Rebbe that were edited by the Tzemach Tzedek, and Tzemach Tzedek put them together and prepared the Likutei Torah. So in the Tzemach Tzedek, when he chose of the vast reservoir of Mamarim of the Alter Rebbe, what to put in Likutei Torah, so Parshas Bamidbar, which is always before Shavuos, so in Parshas Bamidbar he has a bunch of Mamarim that talk about Shavuos, talk about Matan Torah. So there he has three interesting things. He says like this: the Drusha Rishon, the first Maimer in Likutei Torah that talks about Matan Torah, who B'shashek Dimu Yisrael Nasal Nishma. That title is B'shashek Dimu Yisrael Nasal Nishma, a quote from the Gemara. When the Yidden prefaced Nasa to Nishma, they said, we will do before they said we will hear. Right? So who's the player there? The Yidden. The Yidden are the ones who said Nasa before Nishma. V'gam b'drush inyan shenitna Torah al Har Sinai. Even in the other mimer over there, but not by the same title, but the idea of the Torah given to Mount Sinai, what does it talk about? It talks about the person. It talks about the Yid, the Jew's role in Mountain Torah. Vayedaber Elokim, the same title as our mimer. Vayedaber Elokim meaning God, talking about God's role in Mount Sinai. Then the other verse, which is the verse that says, the Torah is like was raised by the Eibishter, like a child, a loving child, a beloved child of the Eibishter. That's referring to Torah. Torah is the Amen that the Eibishter raises. Torah is what the Eibishter. So that's Torah. So you see these Mamar Maluta, these three players at Mount Sinai, the Yidden and the Eibishter and Torah. Okay. So v'achidush b'at Torah shenitna b'matan Torah l'gabei Torah shalom da'avis l'fnei matan Torah hu hein b'negel l'neisna Torah. So what is the novelty of Mount Sinai is something that happens on all three. You see, you turn that. You see what happens? So the chiddush of Mount Torah, the novelty of Mount Torah, takes place with all three: God, the giver, the Yid, and the receiver, and the Torah itself. What is the chiddush that happens by all of them? So the Rebbe explains like this: chiddush. What is the chiddush that happens with regard to God, the giver of the Torah? But Gemara, like the Gemara, says, the word anoichi, which is apsicha de matan Torah, the opening word of the first word of the Ten Commandments is Rashi Tevis Anah Nafshi Ksavis Yavis. The Eibusher says anoichi, the word anoichi is Rashi Tevis, is an acronym for Anah, I, Nafshi, my soul, Ksavis have been wrote, and Yahavis have given. The Eibusher is invested, wrote, and gave his essence, his soul, meaning his essence, into Torah. The Anah, Nafshi, Yatzmusay Baruch. What is the Anah when he says I? Talk about the essence of Hashem. O Pirish, Anah, Nafshi, Ksavis Yahavisu. What is the meaning of I, my soul, was written and given, is as hot areingeschrieben und areingegeben sich allein Anah Nafshi. That God wrote and placed himself, his very essence, into Torah. And to put it in the terms of the Medrash, Macharti lachem teirasi kivayachol nimkarti ima. The Eibusher says, I sold you my Torah as if I was sold together with my Torah. I sold myself with the Torah. We know the Torah is referred to as an inheritance, as a gift, and as a sale. Right? So the Torah, the Rebbe talks about that God sells us, as it were, the Torah. We bought the Torah from God. We're not going to get into that now. But the point is that this idea that the Eibusher sells us the Torah, so he says, I sold you my Torah and I sold myself with it. Meaning that in the Torah, he didn't just give us his wisdom, his Torah. He gave us his very essence together with the Torah. So that's a chiddush. Before Matan Torah, God's essence wasn't invested in the Torah. It was Hashem's wisdom, Taka. It came from him, it was his wisdom. But he himself was beyond it, was removed from it, in a sense. At Matan Torah, what happens? What's the chiddush with regard to Hashem himself? That he invests himself. I know nafshi ksavis yahavis. I place myself, my very essence, into the Torah. This happens at Mount Sinai. What's the chiddush with regard to the Jews that received the Torah? Because remember, as we said in the beginning, the Yidden were there was Torah before. The Yidden were studying Torah before. They were observing Torah before. What was new? So we're saying, with regard to the Eibusher, what's new is that now suddenly his very essence is invested in Torah. With regard to the Yid, what is it? That at Mount Sinai, what happens is that the Torah is now given to the Jews, that they become owners of the Torah. They take ownership of it. That the power to rule on matters of Torah was given to a Yid. What does it mean it was given to a Yid? It was given exclusively to a Yid. It was removed from heaven and given over to a Jew. We studied it, but we didn't have a power to render rulings on it. We couldn't change it, as it were. What happens after Mountain Torah? The Emashgichim Babaskel. We now no longer put any stock in a baskel, in a heavenly voice. The Gemara says, the famous Gemara, the episode of the Tanur of Achenoi. Right, there's an oven, a certain oven, and there's a dispute between the sages as to whether the oven is susceptible to becoming tamei or not. So Rabbi Eliezer says it's tar, it's not tamei, and the Chachamim, the sages, said it was tamei. This was a big raging dispute between them. What? Yeah, and it's a very dramatic story. So the earth starts shaking, and suddenly there's a voice that comes out from heaven that says that Rabbi Eliezer, he knows what he's talking about. What happened? The Eibusher says, "Nitzchunei banei," that you were victorious. You're right. You've defeated me. The Eibusher says, "You're right." And so therefore, even though the halacha follows what happens down here, that ability, that power was invested in the Eden at Mount Sinai. That Yid becomes the owner, takes ownership over Torah. So that's a chiddush that happens in the Yid. That now the Yid owns Torah. That's in Baba Metzia. והחידוש בנגיע לתורה עצמה הוא שהתורה שנית למבט תורה היא באופן של ציווי וגזירה שפועל על האדם והעולם ליהס קורס התורה. What's the chiddush in Torah itself? This is going to be a little harder to explain. Hopefully we have enough time to get through this. That the Torah itself, that the world itself conforms to Torah. That the reality set forth in Torah becomes the reality of the world. That the world conforms to Torah's reality. What does this mean? It's explained in Lekut Torah. It's in Lekut Torah. Alter Rebbe's Maimer explains this with regard to the Ten Commandments. But the truth is that the explanation given there really is applicable to all of Torah, all of the commandments in Torah. That shenemru b'loshin tzivui v'gam b'loshin asid. That the same is true with regard to all of the commandments in the Torah, that the commandments are said when we say, when the wording of the commandment can be understood in two ways. As a command and as a promise, or as a guarantee. Should commit murder. So what does that mean? So you shall not commit murder is a commandment. Don't commit murder. But lo sirtzach also can be understood in another way. You're not going to commit murder. Lo sirtzach, you will not commit murder. Not just don't do it, but you will not. It's like a guarantee that you won't. Why? Because the very prohibition itself, the commandment itself, not to murder, causes that a person is now not capable of murdering. Yeah, that we're going to look at that. That we'll address in note 45. Yeah, we'll get to that in note 45. So, but let's first understand the concept, and then we'll get to that. Well, the point is that Torah, what's the chiddush in Torah is that Torah becomes the reality of the world, or impacts or changes the reality of and the nature of the world and of the people. So lo sirtzach is not just don't commit murder. It's not just a suggestion, but it's a statement of reality. You will not commit murder. Let's look at note 45. The obvious question is, what do you mean? We have people do commit murder. So note 45, Shleimar. Shemitzad Geder Habriya, when we say that the Torah affects the world in that way, that when Hashem says don't do this, it's not just a suggestion or a commandment or a request, but it's also a statement of fact that you will not do it. That's true. That means that is the creation itself, the world itself doesn't commit murder. Mikivan shadibur the Torah geyser ala adam va'elam, since he decrees on it, muchrachim heim liyas kahiras exercises Torah. Therefore, it must conform with that reality and that instruction of the Torah. Ay v'zesh yesh la adam b'chira chavshis, the fact that a person has free will, who should be choltei livchar liyas hepech tevabriya. That means that he can there could be a departure from the natural order. When a person commits a sin, that's breaking away from nature. It's unnatural. So in other words, to put it in other terms, when the Torah tells us not to commit murder, it doesn't mean that a person naturally is inclined, let's say, to murder. Okay, murder is an extreme. Let's go with what he says here. But that's maybe an extreme case. But let's say that a person naturally is inclined or is capable of murder. And the Torah says, I know that you have an inclination to commit murder, so I'm asking you not to do it. Right? So here we're saying no. When the Torah says, Lo sirtzach, he's telling you that you do not commit murder. That's your reality. Somebody could choose to do it. Yes, you can make a choice. Since we have free will, the power of free will is such that you can overrule your own reality. You can overrule your own personality. So it's a departure from the natural order. This is, in a sense, this is also the meaning of the Gemara. I'm sorry. The Gemara says, Ein adam eravera elim kein nichmas bei ruach shtus. A person cannot commit a sin unless he's overcome by temporary insanity. What does that mean? Naturally, a person cannot commit a sin. You're not. What does it mean? That you're not capable of committing a sin. Because if the Torah says don't, that becomes the reality. That is, you're incapable of doing it. People do it. So here we're talking about the idea of choice. That we have free will that allows us to. We can choose to do it. But in a sense, it's the same concept. The temporary insanity means it's not you in your right mind. It's a departure from who you really are and what you're really able to do. Yes. It's not the real you. Right? It's a different direction. Here we're talking specifically that you see the strength or the power of free will, that free will allows you to go against your own nature and your own reality. In a sense, I think you could say, let's first finish the bracketed text, and then if we have some time, we'll finish off this a little bit. In the brackets, now the Rebbe is going to make another point, which is, if we say that what we're trying to say, the third thing, we said that the chiddush of Matan Torah with regard to the Eibishter is that the Eibishter invests his essence in Torah. The chiddush with regard to the Jew is that the Jew now takes ownership of Torah, that we create the realities of Torah. And what's the chiddush with regard to Torah itself? That Torah tells us what the reality of the world is, the nature of the world is. That the world itself becomes a world that conforms with the instruction of Torah. So then, where is that felt? In the Torah or in the world? Seemingly, that's an impact on the world, or the impact on the Yid that has to fulfill the commandments. But we're saying here that it's a chiddush in Torah. How is that a chiddush of Torah? Seemingly, it's a change, a transformation that happens to the world and to the person. How is that a transformation in the Torah itself? So he explains in the brackets. Seemingly, the impact here is on the world and on the person, not on the Torah itself. The Torah itself doesn't seem to have changed. It's just that the commandments of Torah changed the world and changed the person's reality. We call Makim nevertheless Kivan Shem Torah, since the very name of Torah itself, which the Shmei shall call Davar Meir Al Teichrei, that the name of something shows on what it is. Right? It indicates what the thing is itself. So since the name Torah is Umilashon Ha'ira, instruction, Hariachidish Ba'efen Da'hira Sa'Torah Sha'hira Sa'Torah Eich Sha'adam Va'elam Tzrichim Liyas Ba'efen Sha'payeles Alehem Negei Ala Torah. Since Torah itself is instruction, so when I say that the instruction of Torah now is not merely a suggestion, it suggests for you to do this, but the suggestion itself actually alters the reality of the nature of the person and of the world itself. So obviously that's an impact on Torah itself. It means that the meaning of the word Ha'ira in Torah is a different one. And he clarify. How are we doing in time? Another 5 minutes. We'll clarify it even more. Note 48. The fact that Torah is called Torah from the term Hayra, instruction, seemingly in other wisdoms there are also suggestions. So medicine, for instance, will tell you that this food is harmful to your health. So therefore it's suggesting not to eat it. Right? So also there's instruction in that wisdom, and every wisdom would have instructions and advice on how to and what to do. And yet we know that the Chazal say, the Medrash says that when somebody says that there's wisdom in the nations, you believe them, but it says Torah, don't believe them. But yet other wisdoms have instructions, seemingly, right? So Rebbe explains, no, the difference is like this. When other wisdoms offer suggestions, or there are certain ramifications of that thought process, and lead to certain conclusions of what might be acceptable and what's unacceptable, so that is a statement of the wisdom. Of that this idea says, or this philosophy says, this is good and that's bad. But the person himself, it has no impact, no direct impact on the person. You're free to decide what you like, whether you want to accept this value or you don't want to accept the value. But when Torah tells you, Torah makes a statement and tells you what to do or not to do, it's telling you about you, who you are. It's telling you about your very nature, that you're one who doesn't commit murder, you're one who doesn't commit these sins. That's who you are. So the word Hayra is a different word. The word instruction is different. Instruction conventionally in other wisdoms, instruction means I've given you a suggestion, you can either take it or leave it. You're free to decide what instructions you want to accept and which ones you want to reject. But when the Torah is offering, it's not just that it's offering a suggestion, it's making a statement about who you are. It's telling you what you are. Mitzvah Hashem, the next class we'll finish this, we'll conclude this thought a little bit, explain a little bit more, and finish the chapter here.